Viruses are among the smallest of disease-causing agents and can infect all forms of life, including bacteria, animals, plants, and fungi. Viruses cannot replicate without a living cell from an organism. Some viruses are killers, while others are harmless. Viruses can adapt to specific animal species or may move from one species to another. Each virus particle consists of either DNA or RNA, surrounded by a protective protein coat. Some viruses have a special second covering surrounding this protein coat called an envelope. The envelope is made of a layer of fats called lipids. This can affect how resilient viruses are in the environment. Influenza viruses are named based on certain proteins called hemagglutinin and neuraminidase, abbreviated H and N, found on the viral surface. With 16 H protein types and 9 N protein types, there are over 144 possible combinations. This is why influenza viruses have names like H1N1 and H5N1. Within a virus subtype, such as H5N1, there are many strains. Based on the severity of clinical infection in domestic poultry, influenza virus strains in birds are put into one of two categories: low pathogenicity or high pathogenicity. Low pathogenicity viruses cause mild to moderate clinical signs and lower mortality in domestic poultry. In some cases, low pathogenicity viruses cause no noticeable clinical signs. High pathogenicity viruses, on the other hand, cause severe clinical signs and high mortality in domestic poultry. To illustrate this concept, a high pathogenicity H5N1 virus originating in Asia and Africa has resulted in high mortality in domestic poultry and has killed hundreds of people. This should not be confused with some low pathogenicity H5N1 viruses that are occasionally detected in wild birds in North America, which cause only mild symptoms in birds and have not been detected in people. In order for you to protect yourself and your collection, it is critical for you to know important features of influenza viral infection. Understanding the concepts of endemic, epidemic, and pandemic influenzas will introduce you to how health experts describe the spread of influenza through populations. Viral ecology and transmission dynamics help explain the spread of the virus. Certain risk factors could increase the likelihood that you or your animals could become exposed. If your collection becomes infected, you must know the signs of disease. Seasonal influenza is the most common of influenza viruses. Many people get yearly vaccinations to prevent the commonly circulating strains of seasonal influenza. Seasonal influenza is considered an endemic influenza because it occurs with predictable regularity in a population with relatively minor fluctuations in its frequency. In April 2009, a new H1N1 influenza virus appeared toward the end of the influenza season. Due to the large number of cases that were identified during a given time interval, this viral outbreak was considered to be an epidemic. The World Health Organization eventually identified H1N1 as a pandemic virus when it was clear that it would spread globally. A pandemic refers to a worldwide epidemic, usually involving more than one continent. Waterfowl and shorebirds are known to be natural reservoirs for many influenza viruses. As a reservoir, these birds typically do not show clinical signs of infection. Mortality is usually low or negligible. The infection typically is localized in the gastrointestinal tract. The virus is shed in very high levels in the feces. For poultry, most influenza virus infections are primarily localized in the respiratory system. While fecal shedding does occur, the virus is shed primarily through the respiratory tract. Most zoobird species infected with influenza viruses will have a localized infection in their GI tract. Some influenza viruses, such as Asian origin H5N1, may be more systemic, and respiratory shedding may occur. In some zoological species, this virus can cause the same systemic infection, severe illness, and high mortality as it does in domestic poultry. Influenza in humans is localized in the respiratory tract and can be spread by direct contact with infected persons or aerosolized particles. Influenza viruses can jump from a reservoir and successfully infect a new species. Humans, for example, have become infected with the Asian origin H5N1 virus through close contact with infected animals, animal carcasses, and even through the consumption of raw or undercooked animal products. Once transmitted, a virus may adapt to circulate within a new host species population. For example, H3N8 adapted to transmit between horses through horse-to-horse contact. In 2004, the H3N8 equine influenza virus jumped to canids through contact between horses and racing greyhounds at racetracks. The virus has since adapted to dogs and now circulates within the domestic dog population in the United States. This example illustrates how complex the spread of influenzas can be. Because influenza viruses are able to jump from one species to another, including between humans and animals, it is recommended that animal care professionals be vaccinated each year for seasonal or pandemic viruses to prevent possible transmission to your collection. In addition to vaccination, understanding risk factors associated with influenza virus cases and outbreaks can protect you and your animal collection. Risk factors are likely to increase the chances of transmission and infection. So what is a risk factor? In humans, it's known that close contact with infected people increases the risk of transmitting influenzas. Traveling to areas where influenza is common also increases the chance that you will become infected. Inanimate objects such as doorknobs and water glasses can also transmit the virus. In certain strains, cases of influenza have been traced to contact with infected animals, including the consumption of raw or undercooked animal products. Animals have similar risk factors, including transmission through close contact with infected animals, and in some strains, with infected humans. Areas of high animal concentrations, such as poultry farms and wild bird feeding grounds, increase the likelihood of virus transmission. A secondary source of virus transmission can be the animal's environment, which includes its water, feed, feathers, and bedding. Movement of animals may introduce the virus to new populations, which could occur through natural migration or through legal or illegal trade. As with many health issues in exotic species, detailed information does not exist on influenza for every bird or mammal species. Signs of influenza are often similar to other diseases. It is important to note any behavior change or physical signs that are unusual in your collection and inform your veterinarian. Infected birds often show signs of depression, inactivity, and reduced appetite. Neurological signs of influenza infection may include persistent head tilt, seizures, tremors, or difficulty balancing. Birds can also have conjunctivitis, which is a swelling or crustiness around the eye, diarrhea, or difficulty breathing. Some birds may only show ruffled feathers or prolonged sitting on the bottom of its cage. Be aware that some animals may die without showing any obvious signs of illness. Your facility may care for animal species that you may not have considered to be susceptible to influenza. Some mammal species, including mustelids such as ferrets and minks, primates, marine mammals, and both domestic and exotic felids and canids are susceptible to influenza. In these animals, the most common signs of disease are fever, loss of appetite, sneezing, coughing, and difficulty breathing. Animals are usually weak and may have conjunctivitis. In some cases, neurological signs such as incoordination may be noted. Click on the owl to view a list which contains references to published information that describes the clinical signs that were observed in documented cases of influenza in a variety of animal species. Foreign animal diseases are a threat. Knowing the risk factors and careful animal observation will prevent avian influenza virus from infecting you, your animals, staff, and visitors. The next module will introduce you to the basic skills of disease surveillance, beginning with the process of investigation.